Cool. So yeah, maybe to start off, you could just give a brief intro, kind of about yourself and your background, and then we could dive into presentation.
Perfect. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Alex. My name is Frank Mong. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Helium. I've been at the company for about 4 years. And prior to Helium, I was in the cybersecurity business and industry for about 25 years. Different companies like Palo Alto Networks, Symantec, Trend Micro, and SonicWall. And I have to say, getting into the wireless technology industry and cryptocurrency and blockchain has been life-changing. It's been phenomenal. What I thought I could do today, given that the audience is both folks from Colombia, people that are interested in blockchain, and I think this is fairly public, so anyone else that's got interest here, is I thought I would just share with you guys an overview of Helium, what we're trying to do, and how we stumbled upon blockchain and cryptocurrency and how that has really become kind of a crazy incentive that is creating wireless networks. It's really bootstrapping the creation of connectivity in a similar way that I think Bitcoin bootstrapped a new kind of money. And so I think that's sort of the approach I'll take. I've got a few slides and I have some things on my browser that I'll share. And so I'll flip back and forth. Alex, I don't know if you have Q&A or do I pause and let people ask questions along the way? However you want to do this.
We could probably just save questions to the end, but if people have questions as we go along, they can just post them in the chat, and Frank can answer them at the end.
Perfect. So Helium's actually been around for a long time. We started in 2013, co-founded by Sean Fanning of Napster and Amir Halim, who has a video game background. And when the two started back in 2013, the mission back then was to create a global contiguous network that connects not only people and devices that we use, but also Internet of Things, or IoT. And if you're not familiar with Internet of Things, these are little sensors, little robots that can connect via Wi-Fi, cellular, or in our case, really small devices that have small batteries that need a different way to connect. And hence, Helium has addressed that issue. And so that mission started in 2013, and we were venture backed. We were originally funded in Series A by Khosla Ventures. They led around with Mark Benioff and SV Angels, Digital Garage, First Mark Capital. Our Series B was led by Google Ventures, or otherwise known as GV. And we had a strategic investor named Munich Re join us. That's a massive global reinsurer. And Series C is really when we got into the crypto piece of this. And that investment was led by Multicoin Capital and Union Square Ventures. And so that's sort of where we've come from. And the interesting thing is, in every single round, the mission hasn't changed. And to this day, we continue to be focused on building a global contiguous network. And how do you go about doing that? And something happened in 2017 that really was in our favor. And that is Bitcoin and Ethereum became a household name. You saw it on the news. It was all over CNN. My mom was calling me, asking me about Bitcoin. And at that time, funny enough, Helium was struggling. We're struggling to figure out how to actually get on track with our mission, get product market fit, get traction. It wasn't working. We tried many things and we were running out of money. We had about a year left. And so we sat around drinking a bottle of Oban 14, which is a whiskey. And our engineers sat around saying, hey, what do we do? Like, how do we get individuals to help us? Or how do we build a global network? It's impossible. We're a small little startup. We don't have the funding for it. So how do we do it? And because Bitcoin and Ethereum really kicked off in 2017, we thought, well, what if we could put Bitcoin inside a consumer device, a consumer gateway? Would people then put that gateway, which would then share their internet with anything in the world? They just share the internet. Would that work? Could that be the way we bootstrap the network? Obviously, you guys all know Ethereum and Bitcoin is very expensive to use. So for this use case, it's not practical. And we looked at a bunch of other blockchains and tried to find a way in which we could bootstrap a wireless network. And there was nothing out there. So we were forced into this situation where we had to build it ourselves. We did not want to do this, but we had to. We didn't have a choice. And so we created a new blockchain, which we called Helium. And the premise behind it is really a two-token model. First, the mining aspect. So the way Helium works today is that you have to mine the token HNT similar to Bitcoin for it to come to fruition. We didn't pre-mine like a lot of other projects. I think most other projects had a massive pre-mine. We didn't do that. So the token is called HNT, Helium Network Token. It only comes from network creation. So as you build out networks, as you buy a Helium hotspot or a compatible Helium hotspot from our ecosystem, you start to mine HNT by proving you're providing coverage. And proof, which we call proof of coverage, it really involves the individual hotspots proving to other hotspots using radio frequencies, RF technology, that they are real and they are providing useful coverage. And so to do that, there's a number of mechanisms within the blockchain that has to occur. Your hotspot has to be challenged. You have to challenge other hotspots, both using the backhaul internet as well as using radio frequencies. And that capability allowed individual anonymous hotspots to mine the cryptocurrency HNT. There's another way to mine as well, which is through usage. If a dog collar or a Lime scooter or a truck that's using the Helium network for tracking and tracing a supply chain, if they're using a Helium network and your hotspot is the one that transmits the data back to them, you also mine HNT for the services you provided, for the work. And so that's essentially how the Helium blockchain works. And the two-token model involves, as I mentioned, the mining of HNT and the usage of the network. And so the usage of the network is a separate token that's more like a stable coin. It's called a data credit. So it's very analogous to like AWS credits or like United Airline miles. You need to have a data credit to use the network. And the only way to get data credits is to burn HNT out of circulation to create data credits. And data credits have a fixed value, and it's essentially a fraction of a penny, and that's the fixed value. So you can, in essence, get this translation between HNT and data credit because both have values, right? HNT fluctuates based on the secondary market, data credit's stable. And so if you burn HNT, you're always sure to get some data credit. And each data credit is needed, one data credit for transmission of one packet of data. So I just kind of gave you a broad overview of how the token economics works. And this incentive model has really bootstrapped our network. So what does that network look like? Let me do a new share here. This is what the network looks like today. Everything I'm showing you is open. All of our technology, the entire stack, is open sourced. So you can all get this, and I'll provide some links shortly. But we started and we launched this new method, this incentive model, right? And this mining and wireless coverage creation model in August of 2019. And so now we're just slightly over 2 years, and we have about 250,000 Helium hotspots out in the world. The majority of these are built by third parties. We have something like 17 to 30 some odd number of manufacturers building these Helium hotspots. They cost roughly about $499. And what you would end up doing is plugging into your house by a window. If you have the means and you're curious and you have the technical capability, you can put it outside, put a big antenna on your roof, and you start mining HNT. It's pretty simple. It's about a 2 to 3 minute process. And if you're in Colombia, this is what it looks like in New York City. As I zoom in, this is Manhattan. You're somewhere, I think, on the Upper West Side. Am I right there, Alex?
Yeah.
So this is a map of all the miners, and each miner contains the full blockchain. So these are all, imagine like a consumer device, the size of slightly bigger than an Apple TV. It contains the entire blockchain of the Helium blockchain, and it's a node. And so we've got 250,000 nodes out there now, all communicating with each other using both the internet backhaul as well as using RF technology, which I won't get too much into because you guys are not wireless experts, and that's okay. But essentially RF means radio frequency. This is going to date me a little bit, but when I was growing up, we had these things called cordless phones at home, and we're using that same signal that the cordless phones use. In this case, it can go for miles. The signal strength is actually very, very favorable. It goes for miles, it goes very far. And I can show you the usage of the network. You can go to mappers.helium.com and you can see who's using the network. And let's go to New York City. And we can see like who is using it in New York. I can't tell you exactly who, but there's tons of companies using it. And you can click on the middle of Manhattan. Let me go up here, like up here, maybe this is where Columbia is or something. And you can click on these dots and you can see that the yellow lines in the dot I clicked on is actually a device, a sensor of some type that's using the Helium network. And the yellow hexagons are actually the hotspots that heard the sensor and transmitted the data back to the owner. And they've mined HNT for doing that. So that's just a quick example for you guys to see what this is all about, how it looks. I'll go back to the slides, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer questions as well. Let me see here, somewhere in the chat, I think. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, we just surpassed 250,000 hotspots. So that's really the bootstrapping of the network. And the reason we chose IoT, Internet of Things, is because it's a greenfield. There's a massive gap in the world today where there is no IoT network available for sensors, little robots essentially. And it was just easy for us to go and attack. And we've created the coverage. The coverage is, well over 250,000 hotspots now. We're in like 20,000 cities, 142 countries. The ecosystem is very diverse. If you join our Discord as an example, we started a Discord channel for technical developers building applications on top of Helium. And we have now, we started in February of this year. We're at about 105,000 folks on Discord. I'll share the link as well so you guys can join yourselves. But it's just, it's an amazing ecosystem of builders. These are examples of some of the makers that build the miners today that you can buy, and you can go to helium.com/mine to find more miners out there if you're interested in mining. It's very attainable, and mining is about 5 watts of power. So I think from a power utilization perspective, you're not going to see really no difference in your bill. These are some of the users. In addition to these folks, there are customers we haven't named, mostly because they don't like us to use their name in public. But Volvo is a customer, Cisco is a customer. We've got Victor Mousetraps on there. Lime Scooter is a customer, and we've got like a bunch more very large customers that use the network for a number of reasons. And by the way, when they use the network, it's fully encrypted. So the devices and the sensors that send data is fully encrypted at the source. It stays encrypted during transit. The hotspots and the gateways do not unpack the data. The blockchain routes the traffic. Think of the blockchain in this case as like a DNS of sorts, except it's distributed. And the traffic ends up at the owner's hands, fully encrypted. So beyond IoT, what's next? Well, 5G is here. It says 5G is coming. The slide's old, it's here. About 2 weeks ago, an ecosystem provider within the Helium ecosystem named FreedomFi shipped their first 5G Helium mining gateway. What does that mean? That means that they're using an open source, an unlicensed spectrum of 5G called CBRS. They found some partners where they can roam on their spectrum, and they're essentially enabling individuals to become cell providers or cell towers of sorts. Very exciting. And that means your iPhone, your Android, your iPad, your laptops can all connect. If you have a SIM card or eSIM, you can use the Helium 5G network to communicate. And it's a fraction of the cost of what you would pay normal telcos. And so this is a sort of a new stage for us. It's the next level of where we have to go. And we think 5G networks is probably a great way for us to bootstrap and have the people build a network instead of relying on the typical conglomerates that we all know. Well, we hope you join the movement. You guys are all, interested in blockchain and crypto. Join us. All the code is open source, as I mentioned. It's on github.com/helium. Discord is really important. We have a very active community. Join us there. If you're interested in some of the links that I showed you, it's fairly easy. I'll type it out here for you to go to, but it's explore.helium.com. Check that out. Mappers.helium.com and docs.helium.com to learn more. I'll pause here for questions.
Hi, Frank from Germany. My name is Juben. Hi. Thank you very much for your introduction. It's great. I'm already following Helium since a while, and we are building up the network here in Germany.
Awesome.
Regarding 5G, I have a very particular question. And it is 5G is based on CBRS, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
Because CBRS is an open standard over there in the US.
That's correct.
How are you planning that to do in Europe, for example, specifically in Germany? Because 5G in Germany, we don't have such kind of open frequencies, if you might know.
Yeah, so there's two things. One thing that I skipped over, didn't mention, is that not only will, so Freedom 5 built the first 5G mining capability. We're working on a Wi-Fi 6 version as well, which we call Wi-Fi 6 offloading. And so essentially you can share your Wi-Fi. The issue with Wi-Fi 6 is that the reach is very short in range, right? We all know, like, you all have Wi-Fi hotspots at home. It works in 1 or 2 rooms, maybe 3 rooms. Many times when you start to get too far away, outside of your house, it stops working. So there's some challenges with the Wi-Fi 6 protocol, but we are going to support that. So for Europe, as an example, to answer your question, for Germany or EU, Wi-Fi 6 is going to be there very shortly. The other part, which will take us longer, is we are working on a plan to address this with the regulators within Europe, the ETSI standard, the FCC version of the EU. They need to allow for unlicensed spectrum 5G, similar to CBRS. It's already being considered. They just haven't pushed it through. So we'll need to work with them, support that effort, and that just, for us, takes a lot of resource and time, which we're working on now.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for the question. Yes, Ian.
Hey, Frank. So thanks for the presentation today. Quick question also about 5G. I think, most of us probably are familiar with optimizing setup on the IoT miner. Can you talk a little bit about doing the same for 5G?
Yeah, so 5G,
and that's including both the the actual Freedom 5 miner and also the radio cell.
Right. So both the 5G mining gateways as well as the Wi-Fi I mentioned all have what's called LoRaWAN in it as well. So LoRaWAN is an IoT protocol that gives us the range. It can communicate for miles. And so we're leveraging the LoRaWAN protocol for the blockchain communications, even for 5G and Wi-Fi 6. And so when it comes to optimization of providing coverage, there's 2 things to consider. There's the LoRaWAN ability for the blockchain to communicate. So there's one consideration in the antenna setup for that, in optimization for that. And the other is a usage piece of it, which is if your neighbors, your friends, your community is willing to use your 5G or Wi-Fi 6 hotspot, you want them to use it because that's part of mining, and you have to optimize for that. And that today gets into a lot more technical conversations around the cell radios, the microcell versus some of the larger cells that you can buy. It starts to get very technical very quickly because we are still early in that part for 5G. I would say it's trial and error. There's lots of tools online that you can use to help deal with the radio signals and the radio waves. But join our Discord. Tons of people there are experts in radio waves. I'm not one of those. But I think there's some great conversations going on, dedicated channels around antennas, Ian, that can provide a lot of value.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Frank, this is Gregor in California. In my reading, it looks like that there might be like an app for mobile that would help to provide the coverage and the mapping for 5G, and that someone could mine with the handset, with their 5G handset. Is that true?
Not that I know of. I haven't heard that, Greg. There is an app component. If you are on Android and iOS, you can download the Helium Hotspot app. And that's an app that makes it easy for you to go through the installation process of your miner, and it's a wallet to hold the cryptocurrency HNT. That is the only app that I'm aware of. There could be others. The community is really big now, so I'm not able to track everything. But I haven't heard that. And certainly you're not able to mine off of a handset, at least not the Helium token.
That would kind of a stage 2 question. I guess the first stage is, how will you verify 5G coverage?
Yeah, it's early days. I think there's like 100 or a couple hundred units out there at this point that's shipped from Freedom Fi. So I don't have a perfect answer for that. There's a number of what we call HIPs in the GitHub repo. HIPs are Helium improvement plans that's proposed by the community. So there's a number of discussions happening for that exact question, is how do you verify some of this? What are some of the requirements when it comes to 5G or Wi-Fi as opposed to lower WAN? And so those are actually ongoing conversations now, and things that are being voted on by the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hi, Frank. Thanks for being here. I've been involved with the Helium stuff for about a year now, and it's been super fun. Just interested in getting to learn the tech and dabble a little bit in RF. I had a bit of a challenging question for you that I posted in the chat. I was just curious if you're available for a challenging question or not.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I can answer it, but I'll try.
Totally all right if you can't. One of the things on my mind has been kind of wondering what happens if the rewards being given to hotspot deployments plus the secondary market, what if those at some point kind of falter in incentivizing deployment of the hotspots? Do you have any thoughts or considerations about what might happen? Because so far it's been going strong. It's been a no-brainer, but
Great question. I mean, part of why we built a 2-token model is because the mined cryptocurrency HNT, we expected that to be highly volatile. As much as it can go up, we understand that it can go down just as much, if not more. And for this bootstrap of a network to work, there has to be value. The incentive has to exist. And so in the early days, it is highly speculative, and it is dependent on value of HNT. But that is why we built it as a 2-token model, because over time, we really want the reliance of value and incentive to get away from speculation and be implicit to usage and make this a useful ecosystem, a useful network. And that takes time. In the world of Internet of Things and IoT, it's real life applications. It's hardware, firmware, software, and it takes time to build, and it takes time to evolve and get to a point where mass adoption can take place. And so we're trying to buy time essentially for that to occur. Going into the world of 5G Wi-Fi just helps us accelerate usage adoption. And so that's important because remember, 2-token model, right? Data credits, HNT. You're mining HNT. It's a bootstrap model, incentive for people to build a network, right? Secondary market traded, highly volatile, lots of speculation. But as time goes on, and as usage comes, data credit demand will grow. And as data credit demand grows, HNT has to be burned. That means supply of HNT will become scarcer and scarcer. So there's intrinsic modeling there, this give and take, the supply and demand on this 2-token model, what we call burn and mint, that should drive H&T value over time purely based on utility, like that, I know that is very ideological. That is the vision that we operated under, and we're in the process of executing that. I hope that helps.
Thanks.
Yeah, pleasure.
Frank, I know you can't talk about names of deals that haven't been signed. We saw the gigs guy, but what do you kind of see as the next 2 or 3 years going about in terms of chicken and egg, and what the odds are that an MNO is even going to bother with the network until it's of critical mass? Of, is this like MVNOs first and then an MNO? How does it, what's the progress? How do you see that unfolding for 5G?
Oh man, you're gonna get me in trouble.
You don't need to say any names. I'm just like, is this MVNO and then MNO?
Tuesday, all I can say, watch out for Helium on Tuesday.
All right.
Your answer will be on Tuesday. I hope that doesn't get me in trouble. Gosh. Okay.
I won't say any more.
Alex, don't publish this until after Tuesday, please.
Yeah, no,
Sounds like we should buy Helium today.
What's the goal now? What is MNO?
So yeah, MNO is a managed network operator. So examples of MNOs are, you know, the AT&T, Verizon's, T-Mobile's, and there's a bunch of other up and comers, and there's a bunch of tier 2s and tier 3s, and those are like more regional players. A good example would be C-Spire, and there's like a number of others in that world. Those are MNOs, right? And then there's MVNOs, which are managed virtual network operators. So they're not the AT&Ts or Verizons or T-Mobiles, but they're like the Boost Mobiles, the Mint Mobiles, and they're Twilio. Those are all MVNOs. They don't actually operate a network, but they've done deals where they're reselling network bandwidth, if that makes sense. And so the question is a good one, because working with an MNO, right, like an AT&T of the world, or working with an MVNO, like a Boost Mobile, is important for Helium. Because if we can get relationships there where their handsets, their iPhones, their Androids can roam onto the Helium network, then that will drive data credit usage, which will then drive burning of HNT. And that will help our 2-token model, just the flywheels will just keep spinning, you know what I mean? And that is what this model is all about. So that's why he asked that question, because that's going to bring a flood of usage onto the network, which is what we want as network operators. In this case, Helium is a decentralized network operator. That's the way you want to think about it. Owners of the hotspots own the network.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, pleasure. Any other questions?
I think Ian might have a question.
Ian, you're on mute if you do.
I think he already asked.
Okay, cool.
I've got one more that's easier for you. Do you have any favorite use cases?
I do. So I have kids, right? And so one of the things I have 2 young kids, and so as I've been raising my kids, one of the things we didn't want to do is give them cell phones too early in their age. And if you're not a parent, you wouldn't know what this means, but you know, young kids are getting cell phones now. Like I don't know, it's just a thing. Right? I think everyone just has to get cell phones now, and so we really didn't want that. We just wanted to focus on like old school things, like pick up a book and read a book with pages versus a Kindle. Simple things like that. And so we really struggled with that because our kids have to take the bus to school and public transportation. And so there's points and times when you don't know where they are. And because if you had a phone, you could do track my phone or find my friend. And so the just as a parent, knowing where your kids are would be great. And so when Helium's network was dense enough in my city, I used little trackers and put it in my kids' like backpack and in their pockets. so I can at least track them and watch where they're going and watch them on the bus, coming home. It just gave me sort of this false sense of security, I guess. And so I love that. I love that use case because it's personal to me. But there's lots of other great use cases. And I know there's a question on there about like who uses this. You know, I mentioned there were some brands I showed you guys, but the big like useful things are related to, like, as I mentioned, tracking and tracing, maybe not your kids, but like in fleets of trucks, like Volvo. Volvo has fleets of trucks across Europe. They actually use the LoRaWAN network to track their trucks. And now they roam onto Helium through a partnership with Actility. So that's phenomenal. I love that. Other use cases are, I think, much more like, you know, boring. Let's call it mundane, but good for the environment. Like water leak detection. So in parts of New York City, in parts of Boston, I know companies that have deployed like thousands of sensors into condominiums and apartment complexes where it can track leaky waters, leaky toilets or washing machine leaks or sinks that are leaking. And it prevents, one, property damage, but I think two, more importantly to me, is it helps us conserve water. Like, water is a precious commodity, guys. We just don't have enough water in the world for all the people that are coming. And I just feel like we got to like use it wisely. And so water conservation is a big thing for me. And I love that. So hopefully that helps answer some of those questions. We have some others as well. Other questions? I think, what is that? I don't have the name, but there's a hand up. I can't see the name.
I think Ivan is in front of me. Maybe he asked first.
Oh, I
realized I left that on. Sorry about that, guys. But actually, you know, now that you mentioned, one other question is just, can you talk about trends in data usage from, you know, large or even smaller partnerships and, you know, projected growth over the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of difficult on data usage side because we don't see all the use cases out there. Like Helium is nurturing the ecosystem. So we work with a lot of customers, but we don't work with all of them. And because the data is encrypted, we really don't know. Like, I know for a fact Coca-Cola is using the network, but I don't know who it is or where it's happening because the data is all encrypted. So I think the trend's actually moving very well. So from a network expansion perspective, I expect the network to be about 300,000 to 400,000 hotspots by the end of the year. I think by the end of 2022, we should be well over 2 million hotspots. I know that because the chip makers are telling me they've already sold about 3.5 million chips to build these hotspots. So the math adds up to me. That's great. And on the usage side, it's the number of data credits that are used and the number of HNT burned continues to go up exponentially month over month. And that's all I know. Like, that's the data sort of that I can point to where usage is happening.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay. Actually, I have a couple questions. First question, talk about the 5G. Actually, I took Potent classes, and I look at a lot of this paper talk about the magnetic field. The 5G will affect the health brand or health issue. So I just want to know whether when you decide the algorithm, do you concern about this health issue, about this low frequency brand? Yeah.
So there's multiple frequencies, right? There's the sub gigahertz frequency 915 that we use. There's Wi-Fi frequencies that we use, and then on the 5G CBRS frequency, it's like 3.5 gigahertz. You know, I think there's a number of factors when it comes to your health. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, so I haven't done extensive studies here. But my background is electrical engineering. I know a little bit about signals. And what I can tell you is radio waves and signal waves have a direct correlation with power, the amount of power you put into the signal. And so when you think about health and you think about how close you are to that signal, I think one of the biggest factors there is, and the questions you got to ask is, well, how much power is going there? Like cell towers that you see, when you're driving on a freeway, or you see these large towers in your city, they're running kilowatts of power. That's a lot of power. So yeah, you don't want to be too close to that. But when you're running a helium hotspot in 5G, you can't have that kind of power. The CE and SEC won't let you do that. There are laws protecting all of us from killing ourselves. You're not allowed to put that much power on that antenna. And so the power is way less. I don't have the power numbers on top of my head, but it's not in the range where it's going to be like you should worry about your health. And don't forget, like we all have this thing, in our pockets. This is a massive cellular antenna, runs 4G LTE, sometimes 5G, the big old battery, and it's in your pocket, right next to all your important things. So I don't know. That's all hopefully it's okay.
Yes, interesting, because for this magnetic field, a lot of animals, they are actually more sensitive than human. For example, like some dog or some bird, they always can check the north and south without any, based on the Earth's magnetic field. So it's kind of interesting about this gene and relay about this magnetic. That's what I read some interesting paper and write some coursework. And the second thing is about beside the 5G, do you have any idea about the 6G or other more advanced network in the future, or maybe the satellite internet, like the Starlink or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like 10G apparently is like on the horizon. I don't think that would ever end, right? There'll be more and more bandwidth, faster bandwidth. That's sort of like the nature of Moore's law for us, right? There's always going to be faster, bigger, better. But I don't know what the next thing is. We're not even like close to, getting 5G deployed right now. So I'm not sure sort of where this goes beyond that. As it relates to satellite, that's a really good point, actually. One of the things we have done is we have worked with Starlink, and the engineers there know about helium, and it's a nice complement to their approach. They have a lot of demand for satellite-based communications, especially in areas where there is no other option, no cellular, no cable, right? And the issue for them is they don't have enough supply. They don't have enough satellites yet to light it up for everybody. So what's really cool is if one person in your neighborhood gets Starlink and you have a Helium 5G hotspot, you can share that Starlink backhaul with your neighbors. And that model makes sense for the engineers at Starlink because it helps them solve a problem. If you're living in Manhattan or you're living in a small borough, not everybody has to have Starlink. One person out of 100 or one person out of 50 can get Starlink, and the rest can just aggregate and piggyback using helium. And that's a pretty cool way to solve the supply and demand problem for Starlink.
And because I am an HVAC engineer, I just entered a trade show about this HVAC, like the architecture real estate. About this IoT, I saw the Google, they have lab that they do some specific this IoTs. They sell a lot of this sensor to their customers for energy efficiency, control the room. So I also checked your website have a lot of this IoT integrate for some, especially for some construction or some architecture. What is that? The farm. How to track that? So I just want to. So if a company want to purge or cooperate with you, how much money they should prepare to buy your service? That's my kind of question about.
Yeah, so we're open source. So Helium doesn't charge for anything. You don't pay us anything. We have a number of tools that help farms, corporate enterprise customers to adopt Helium and adopt LoRaWAN, and there's no charge. We have all the tools. It's free. Everything's in GitHub. It's all open source. We do it, again, like I said, right, to build that two-sided ecosystem, the two-sided market, network supply, network coverage, and network usage. It's crucially important, right, for this economic model to work, that both sides are spinning and both sides are working. So we don't charge for anything. The Helium is open source.
Okay, so the most income is from the user who use the network, the hotspot network, right?
Not for us, not for Helium, for the blockchain. So the two token model, data credits, HNT, that's happening on the blockchain. So if you're a network provider, you're a hotspot host, you're mining HNT. And the more you're useful, the more data you're transmitting and you're moving for the network, the more you mine.
Yeah, but my question is, if you are a provider, how can you make your company keep going and more income for it?
We're not a provider. We open sourced everything. We're like Linux, like Linux and Red Hat, right? Linux is the open source OS. Red Hat is the company, right, that sells the service on top of Linux. We haven't gone there yet. We're just Linux. There's no Red Hat today.
Because,
so that's
because that is very kind of confused me. So how can you support your employee or all kind of spend after?
Yeah, we've got really large venture backed. We're venture backed. I mentioned some of the venture. I didn't even mention Andreessen Horowitz, their investor now, and Ribbit Capital, Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX and Alameda. You know, they're all investors. I forgot to mention that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Noel.
Yeah, so you brought up the venture aspect, and you also mentioned early on that like there was no like pre-mine.
That's
or
right.
Something. So with all these venture backers, I know there's like some people buy into the token and then other people buy into equity.
Right.
Would Helium be an equity model?
Yeah, Helium is, yeah, so there's two pieces to that. Helium is equity, right? Because we were traditionally equity backed. This is before crypto, right? Before crypto. And what happened with Multicoin and USV in that funding round is we had to create something called a Helium security token. That was minted when the blockchain hit the Genesis block. In the minting of that were 10,000 Helium security tokens that could be dispersed to investors and founders, people that created the blockchain, and that would collect and distribute a portion of the mining rewards for a number of years. It started off at like 35% year one. It decreases by 1% every year until it hits like something like 15%. Then it goes flat.
Okay. And then, yeah, like you mentioned how like the token economics like kind of like helped bootstrap like getting users to like set up the like Helium nodes.
That's right.
So to speak. But like beyond that, like you guys don't really have any relationship to the rest of kind of like crypto markets or like you don't have to worry about any like correlations or anything like that. Would you say that's the case? Because it seems like it's more of kind of like you guys are over like doing this hardware thing, where like most other people like you've got to be like EVM compatible, and there's a lot of like the market cycle. Like, do you think you guys would be less affected by that?
You mean like the rest of the crypto market cycle?
Yeah.
I think what we've done is we've tried to model our token closer to Bitcoin than Ethereum, right? So we are trying to create the perfect, the perfect connectivity, the perfect wireless network, like Bitcoin is trying to be the perfect money, or Solana is trying to be the perfect compute, right? But we're more like that, I think, than NFTs or DeFi. Like there's no direct correlation to NFTs as an example in our world. we're much more like IRL, like we're all about it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us incredibly unique, is that our blockchain relies heavily on real life, real world hardware. We have a hardware necessity. It must be there. And it's creating real wireless coverage for real usage. And so I think that makes Helium very unique from a lot of other attempts. Like there's other cryptocurrencies out there that try to do something like this, not exactly. I don't think anyone has tried to tackle the problem of infrastructure creation, like literally building infrastructure to create a new internet. No one's tried this. And that's sort of where we're going.
One other question is like, I've heard that Nodal is kind of like a competitor, like they're trying to do something similar. And I'm not super familiar. And like, could you possibly explain some of the advantages and the disadvantages of the two different approaches, if you know?
I don't know. I don't know Nodal very well. I've heard of them, as you have. I haven't spent any time on what they do, so I don't know.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Aryan?
Hey Frank, how are you doing?
Hey.
So with regards to what's your outlook with the hardware shortages right now? I know that the Helium devices are kind of trading at a premium on secondary markets. So in the kind of next 6 months, what's your outlook on kind of addressing that shortage and increasing coverage quickly?
Yeah, so just so you guys know, in total, there have been about 70 manufacturers that have applied to the Helium community for approval. They've built hardware, or they've built designs. They've submitted hardware for approval. I'm trying to click through here to look at the numbers. I think we're in that 70 like hardware makers that are trying to get there. 24 have been approved. And I would say this, out of the 24, and by the way, they're all trying to ramp up manufacturing. The earliest makers like Rack Wireless and Bobcat are probably in the best position to deliver the hotspots / miners in a timely fashion. Everyone else is struggling. And the struggle here, partly is ramping up manufacturing, I would say mostly supply chain, somewhere along the supply chain, because these are hardware components. There's lots of different pieces. So it's no different than the shortages of Xbox and PS5. It's like we're dealing with the same problems here. But the earlier manufacturers have had a lot more experience, and so they've ramped up, their supplies, I think, more appropriately than the newcomers. But I think as time goes, you'll start to see the issue of supply chain decrease. The time to market should get lower and lower over time. And there's some really good manufacturers coming on board, by the way. So not to say that they can't do it, they do need time to ramp. But if you want to buy something today, I would look at Rack Wireless. They actually started a direct-to-consumer model called Minted. And I think it's the URL, I think it's Get Minted, GETMNTD, I believe. Yeah. There you go. Look at Ryan's post. Yeah. So I will look at that. I'm sorry, you're right. It's very difficult to get miners right now. Any other questions, folks?
I had a question.
Sure.
Hey, are there any, sorry if this has already been asked, but are there any issues with the China cryptocurrency ban and the Helium network running in China?
I'm trying to figure that out myself. I don't think so. Like we do have a China team that's based in China, and most of the cryptocurrencies that China cares about, they've talked to the teams. luckily for us, I think we're under the radar. I think, and not that they don't know about us. I think they do know about us. By the way, like in our early days in 2019, when we first launched, someone in China lit up a helium hotspot. We don't know who exactly it was, but I asked a friend to look up the area that it was in. It was in Beijing, and it was in an official government building. So I'm pretty sure they know who we are, but they haven't come to us directly to say, you know, stop building the network. But you never know. They could tell us tomorrow to do that. Who knows?
It seemed to me like
Gotcha,
they were
thank you.
more concerned about Bitcoin's power usage for a while, shutting that down, and then, you know, with Helium being so power efficient, hopefully, you know.
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not an expert in China geopolitics, so I don't know. Any other questions?
This has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much, Frank. I think we could probably wrap here. Thanks for taking the time, actually going over time, to answer everybody's questions.
Great. Pleasure to meet you all. By the way, we are hiring. So if you're interested in joining us, send me an email, frank@helium.com. Let me just remind me that we met here on this thing.
All right, thanks.
Thank you all.